May the jury find the defendant, Joseph Dwayne Elledge, guilty of murder in the second degree.
Tonight, the murder trial of Joseph Elledge comes to an end.
She deserves justice, ladies and gentlemen.
Those closest to Mongshi Ji say this is closure.
I think we need to come to an end to this, and this is the right time.
Tonight, we walk you through the trial.
It didn't register to me that they were human bones.
Including what arguments the jury ended up believing and what they didn't.
What happened was a tragic accident.
Finally killed her at the apartment that they shared.
Hear from a former prosecutor about what went wrong for the man now facing years in prison.
This guy really angered the jury when he took the stand and answered the questions the way he did.
Right now on KOMU 8 News at 10.
Coverage you can count on. KOMU 8 News starts with breaking news.
Breaking news tonight, a jury has found Joseph Elledge guilty of second-degree murder in the death of his wife, Mongshi Ji. Right now, Elledge is being sentenced in court. That same jury will recommend a sentence to the judge. Good evening, everyone. I'm Noah Klein. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's get straight to it here. We've got live team coverage tonight. KOMU 8's Elise Schoening will join us live. She talked with those who knew Mongshi Ji best about who she was as a person. She'll tell us what this verdict means to them. KOMU 8's Isabel Ladon is at the Boone County Courthouse with live coverage for us after speaking to people who sat in on the last day of the trial supporting Mongshi Ji and her family. But first, KOMU 8's court reporter Peyton Headley has been following this trial since day one. Peyton, the jury deliberated for more than 7 hours.
The jury reached a verdict around 2 hours ago. They found Joseph Elledge guilty of second-degree murder of his wife, Mongshi Ji. But this isn't the sentencing that the prosecution was hoping for. They were hoping for the charge of first-degree murder for Elledge. The reaction in the courtroom was a little hard to read while the verdict was read. The only people in there were 3 members of Elledge's family. They were fairly emotional. As the verdict was read, Elledge remained fairly emotionless. Right now, the court has moved on to the sentencing phase, and both the prosecution and defense are calling on witnesses to testify. The prosecution asked the jury to consider 10 to 30 years or life in prison for Elledge, bringing up his former child abuse charges. The defense is asking for 10 years, also mentioning Elledge's child and getting the chance to watch her grow up. One of the last things that prosecutor Dan Knight said to the jury before they left for deliberation was a plea for justice.
She deserves justice, ladies and gentlemen. Mongshi deserves justice. You know her now. You've listened to those recordings. You know what kind of person she was.
In the defense's closing argument, attorney Scott Rosenblum argued there was no intent and no deliberation, and that G's death was a tragic accident followed by stupid decisions.
All this talk about gaslighting, the only person that's gaslighting in this courtroom is Mr. Knight. He's telling you things that don't exist.
Again, the jury is currently in this sentencing phase with character testimony about Elledge. So far, we've heard from a couple of CPD officers and detectives, and again, we are expecting that sentencing later tonight.
All right, Peyton, you've been covering this trial for the last 10 days. You've been there for just about every hour of it. Were there any key moments that could have led the jury one way or the other?
Something the jury asked to re-examine in the deliberation room was the testimony from a pathologist. He was the final witness of the trial yesterday, and he said he couldn't determine a cause of death for G. So that's something that the jury said they needed to take a second look at. Okay, Peyton, we will come back to you in just a minute, but for now, let's continue our breaking news coverage tonight. We're going to stay at the courthouse. Before today's verdict, friends of Mongshi Ji talked to us about what this means to them. KOMU 8's Isabel Ladon is live there now after speaking with G's former roommate. Bella, what did she say?
Noah, just as the jury went into deliberation before the verdict was announced, I talked with Mongshi Ji's former roommate, Kylie Lee, and she told me that she didn't think there was enough evidence to convict Joseph Elledge of first-degree murder. Kylie Lee lived with Mongshi Ji before she started dating Elledge, and she told me earlier that she thinks Elledge killed her friend with intent. And she told me because Mongshi's parents and family have been suffering, she had hoped that there would be justice. But now, after the verdict, she says there's finally closure on a 2-year case.
It just has been so long to waiting for this trial. and for her part, whether how did she do it and all the details. I think it's tough to know those details for anyone that cares about her, but at the same time, it's settling as well.
After the verdict, Lee also told me that she thinks Joseph Elledge's verdict was fair, and she hopes that Mongshi Ji's parents and family won't have to suffer anymore. Reporting live in Columbia, Isabella Ladon, KMU8 News.
All right, Isabella, thank you for those details. Continuing our breaking news coverage, we're going to go back out to KMU8's court reporter Peyton Headley. She was there for just about every hour of this trial again. Peyton, this case comes to an end after quite some time, really.
After 2 years of unknowns, 10 days on trial, and 7 hours of deliberation, one thing is now clear. Joseph Elledge has been found guilty of second-degree murder of his wife, Mongshi Ji.
She's dead.
It started with a bombshell.
She's laying there, in his bed.
For the first time in 2 years, the defense admitted Elledge killed his wife.
What happened was a tragic accident.
But says he killed her unintentionally.
He's almost in a disassociative state of denial.
Prosecuting attorney Dan Knight says Elledge planned to kill her and physically threatened her often.
Finally killed her at the apartment that they shared.
The jury heard hints of the couple's relationship through 9 hours of secret recorded conversations.
It's been a terrible relationship.
Text messages.
We're very cold most of the time.
And Elledge's journal.
Extensively wrote about how much he hated Mongshi.
But the defense said these conversations are just a snapshot of the couple's relationship. The jury also saw videos and pictures of Ji's shallow gravesite.
It didn't register to me that they were human bones.
A hiker found her skeletal remains in Rockbridge State Park.
And the whole situation kind of looked a little bit like something a kid would have done to make an altar.
It's also where experts testified that soil from the gravesite matched soil on Elledge's boots.
They showed similarities into where the victim's body was recovered.
But the most unconventional testimony of the trial.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth?
We got to hear from the only person who saw it happen.
I do.
Elledge himself.
She didn't seem to be breathing or moving in any way.
Elledge walked the jury through the hours before and after he says Ji died.
The walls are closing in on me.
And time closing in. Ji's body stayed in the trunk of her car for more than 24 hours.
I'm still thinking that I need to bury her body.
He took her body to Rockbridge the next morning and buried her, while his 1-year-old daughter waited in the car.
How do you feel about it now?
Shame. Stupid.
And now, more than 2 years after it happened, it comes to an end. Again, we should know Elledge's prison sentence by the end of the night. The state just called up 2 of Mongshi's friends to the stand. One of them said she can't feel happy as long as she knows that Mongshi didn't get justice. Noah.
Okay, Peyton Headley with lots of coverage for us at the Boone County Courthouse. Peyton, we will try to get back to you. Thank you very much. Moving along, we've spoken to several family members and friends of Mongshi Ji over the last 2 years, and the weeks leading up to today's verdict have brought even more emotions. KMU8's Elise Schoenig spoke recently with a close friend of Ji's who told her exactly what it's felt like for him.
Right here on MU's campus is just one of those places that Mongshi Ji will be remembered forever. Now remember, after this verdict tonight, that marks almost 2 years since any of Mongshi's family, friends, loved ones have gotten to see her in person. And I talked to one of those friends. He told me while he is filled with so many emotions following today's verdict, he's just hopeful for healing and moving on.
That actually definitely inspired me.
Dawei Lee says his friend Mongshi Ji was his inspiration.
And she was actually wearing the t-shirt of Mizzou with tigers when she got back to our college.
The two met at the same college back in China. She led Lee and many others to America and to MU.
She mentioned about how nice Mizzou is. That actually inspired a lot of us coming here for programming.
Soon after the two finished their education at MU, Lee says they lost touch.
And later on, our connection reduced a little bit, especially after, I think after she got married. Yeah.
Police resumed their search for missing Columbia mother Mongshi Ji Elledge today.
Like many of her loved ones, Lee was committed to finding Ji.
I was a little bit anxious and worried, so I offered help on searching for her.
With the news of her remains came the news of losing his friend.
A very smart, wise, and caring mother. A very dedicated and hardworking student. A very loyal employee.
Even as time passes and the trial closes, he says he's still left with the pain of missing her.
If Mongshi were still here today, what do you think is something that you'd want to say to her and something that you'd want her to know?
I'm sorry. This is a little bit touching when you say she's still here today when she is not. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm a...
Lee says he hopes people never forget Ji and who she was. But he says with the pain of grieving,
I think we need to come to an end to this. Yeah. And this is the right time.
He's hopeful for healing in moving on.
I did speak to Lee again tonight, just moments after that verdict came out, and he told me among many different emotions, he was finally able to feel a sense of closure and moving on from the loss of his friend. He also told me about a new emotion he felt for the first time, and that was sorrow for the family of Joseph Elledge. Reporting live here from MU's campus, I'm Elise Schoenig, KOMU 8 News.
After the verdict broke, I sat down exclusively with former Cole County Prosecutor Bill Tackett about what happened. Here again with Bill Tackett. So, Bill, the jury finds Elledge guilty in second-degree murder for his wife Mongshi Ji's death. General reaction first.
Well, remember, before they were trying to choose between reckless behavior and intent. They've landed on intent. Once they did that, they had to decide, was it premeditated? And it looks to me like there was such confusion after the murder that they felt like he definitely murdered her. He intended to do it, but that the pre-planning wasn't there because it was such a mess after the fact.
So the verdict comes out, but this isn't over. The trial continues.
Yeah, a few years back, actually quite a few years back, the Supreme Court for Missouri bifurcated these trials, and that's a fancy word for they split up the sentencing side from the guilt and innocence side. So they wanted jurors to decide on guilt or innocence, then turn to the sentencing and listen to aspects of the person's life. Their mother could take the stand, their preacher, they themselves can take the stand. Then the parties argue about what punishment, they're able to argue about what punishment should prevail here. And so it's separated out. Before it was all jammed in together, and they've split it up now.
I'll ask you this. Does the jury's decision tonight tell us anything about the potential other decisions they could make about punishments?
Well, you don't know what give and take there was. You don't know who was leaning toward going with murder first, or who was leaning toward involuntary manslaughter. So there's going to be different levels, or there could be very different levels of belief on how much time should be given. Or they walked in and said, after a period of hours, said this guy's guilty of murder too. He dragged law enforcement and half of mid-Missouri around in circles and in knots, dragging a river and finding a body out in Rockbridge, and you know what? The guy gets life. It could be that simple. I mean, this guy really angered the jury when he took the stand and answered the questions the way he did. It did not go over well. You could see it on their faces. It was not a good day for him. So that's going to be a problem now. They have to figure out a way to undo that, right, and make him appear to be somebody who had a bad childhood or some reason why he would be this bad of a person.
That's just a piece of that interview. You can find the full version on our streaming apps.